So I'm so grateful that I get to be here today with all of you and be a part of your worship service. And I'm so thankful that you help support Alpha Clinics. And today we're celebrating the event of Advent, a holy season of waiting, wonder, and miraculous hope. And I can't help but think about the Virgin Mary and how she carried, Jesus as a tiny, tiny, unseen human being, just the same way that we all enter this world. And I know that the smallest of us all are a real big matter to the Lord. And as we celebrate the incredible work of Alpha Clinics, I'm kind of like prejudiced because I love this ministry. We're really celebrating that heartbeat of Advent, the love, the joy, and the peace, and the hope, the very things that we pour into women's lives and babies every single week. And Advent tells us that small beginnings can hold world-changing promises. The greatest story ever told would have been labeled an unplanned pregnancy, at least for Mary and Joseph. And a brave young mother, a humble man, and a baby who changed everything. So from a very young age, my father taught me what it means to be pro-life. And he taught us that we are all made in the image of God, the Imago Dei. And because God is the author of life, every human being has dignity, value, and the God-given right to live. And we carry the sacred responsibility now to defend and protect that life at every stage. So I grew up in Montana, the youngest of 8 kids in a devout Irish Catholic family, what some may call the ideal family. We had dinner every night at 6 p.m. sharp because my mother was a miracle worker. And afterwards, for dessert, we all went into the living room and knelt around and prayed the rosary. And so imagine with my upbringing how afraid I may have been to tell my parents that I was pregnant. And I remember standing in my kitchen, and I was looking out of the big picture window, and my dad was out on the lawn. And 2 of my sisters and one of my sister-in-laws were standing sideways pregnant. And I remember thinking, I should be in that picture. And I already had a lot of hopes and dreams for my baby, but I also hoped my dad would kill me, even though he'd never laid a hand on me. So the first Advent candle is hope. Just like Mary stood facing the fear and destiny of her pregnancy, I once stood there too, 15 years old, pregnant, unsure of my future. And Advent reminds us that God steps into that fear with hope. And Mary's yes, it required, and so does every woman who chooses life, it required courage. And that courage leads to life. So, I was nearly 6 months pregnant. And I'll never forget the night that my mom told me, I'm going to tell your dad on the way home from the airport that you're pregnant. And so I did what any responsible teenager would do. And I called up my boyfriend, and he picked me up in the station wagon, and we went and hid in the church parking lot. And I'm like, at least we kind of knew where to go. But we listened to the radio, and I kept hearing my dad would always say, being Irish Catholic, he valued life, he would always say, a baby is a blessing, a baby is a blessing, a baby is a blessing. Those words gave me the courage to go home. And we had a really long driveway, longer than this, this walkway here. And I remember praying all the way up. And I put my hand on the doorknob, and I did the sign of the cross, and I was like, please, God, let my daddy be asleep. But when I opened up that door, there he sat, across the living room, sitting in his green velvet chair. He wore pop bottle glasses, and he was always reading his Bible early morning. And I just froze and stood there and just burst into tears. And my dad walked over to me, and he put his arms around me, and he said, Mom said you're going to have a baby. And all I ask is that you pray every day what's best for your baby, because we're too old to raise another child. So whether it's adoption or whether you place the baby, if you parent the baby, will help with the parenting. And then he kissed me on the forehead and said, now get to sleep. You have school in a couple of hours. So by the time I got to my bedroom and touched that doorknob, I remember thinking my shame was gone because my dad had given me grace. And not every young woman has parents like mine. And this is why Alpha Clinics exists. Mary wasn't alone. God sent Joseph to stand by her side. And I wasn't alone because my parents stood by my side. And today, by supporting Alpha Clinics, he sends you, the church, to stand with women who feel scared and alone. See, my parents believed deeply in the sanctity of human life. My mom was also a counselor at a PRC in the 70s. And she thought that I should move away from home and go live in Bozeman with my sister if I was going to consider adoption, to be away from my boyfriend. So my sister took me to a PRC, Pregnancy Resource Center, in her town. And I met a lady named Nell, and she had like those old photo albums. And I remember looking through the pictures of the families that were waiting to adopt. And they had like these hopeful looks on their faces, standing outside of their house and with a dog and just big smiles. And as beautiful as adoption is, that noble option, I chose to parent. But we do have a client right now who is considering adoption at Alpha Clinics. So if you could keep her in prayer, that would be wonderful. It is a very difficult decision. And I gave birth to my baby girl on September 1st, and I named her Erica Michelle. I named her after Erica Kane from the soap opera because I was a teenager. And what can I say? At that moment, it really marks the beginning of my love story with a mother and a daughter. And my daughter is a social worker in child welfare in Solano County, and she's just a phenomenal human being. She was a PRC client director in Napa when we had that site, and I just adore her. She's so smart, you wouldn't even believe it. And my parents, lived out the John 10:10 model. Not the first part, but where I came that they may have life and have it more abundantly. And this abundant life model is reflected in the most celebrated, unexpected pregnancy in history, Mary and Joseph. And like so many today, they faced fear and uncertainty. But when Mary was afraid, God sent the angel Gabriel to tell her, do not be afraid. And when Joseph hesitated, again, Gabriel went and said, you're going to marry Mary and be a father to Jesus. We need more Gabriels like this, more people that speak courage into women's lives, and more Josephs who embrace fatherhood and parenting. And fathers are stepping up at Alpha Clinics, attending parenting classes and choosing life. And pregnancy centers evangelize beautifully, but it is the church who is uniquely positioned to disciple these families. Well, my life was far from easy. I was kicked out of my parochial school. Adults told me I had my whole life ahead of me and I was going to ruin my future. I was teased for having a biracial baby. My boyfriend got another girl pregnant, and she sadly had an abortion, and her friends threatened me all through high school. But no one tells a teenager that the broken heart is often the hardest thing to recover from. And just months after my daughter was born, I didn't learn my lesson, and I found myself, same boyfriend, same thing, pregnant again. And at 22 weeks pregnant, I caught him at the park rolling around in the grass with another girl, and I was just heartbroken, and I fought him for 2 city blocks. I did. I may look really sweet, but that got me mad. But that night I went home, and in the silence of my bedroom, I went into labor. And I went into my bathroom, and I was crying for my mom, but she wasn't hearing me. And I delivered a tiny son at 22 weeks. And I'll never forget his little tiny hands, his little tiny feet, nor the sorrow that followed. So this is what a 22 baby fetus in the womb looks like. This is an exact replica. And babies are able to survive outside of the womb even a little bit younger than this because of, science and medical. But I think about my tiny baby when I realize that 63% of abortions now in the U.S. are done from the abortion pill, the do-it-yourself abortion pill. And these young ladies are sent back to their dorm room or to their bedroom like I was, or their bathroom, to go through that pain and delivery and possibly seeing their baby as well. And there is a new study that came out that said that 1 in 11 women experience an adverse effect, infections and things. The pill is a very dangerous pill. And there is hope because PRCs like us, Alpha Clinics, is one of the only ones in the area that offers abortion pill reversal, known as APR. And when medicine is given within 72 hours, we can save between 64 and 68% of these pregnancies. And we've witnessed the peace and the joy. I think of Sarah. Sarah had been trafficked. She'd been drug addicted. She didn't have a good life. But Sarah's mom wasn't really supporting her, and she felt desperate, and the boyfriend wasn't around. And so she said she sat on her bed and held the first pill for like 20 minutes. And then she finally took it. After she did, she desperately started searching, can I get out of this? And she found APR, and she came to Alpha, and I got to see her recently with her little girl. And, it's amazing. Like, she's off drugs. She's very stable. She's in nursing school. And, things are good. And every single one of the babies is a miracle. So, funny thing that happened to me on the way to the airport. So a TSA guy, he stopped me because on my carry-on, you know how they put it up there, like the screen? And he said, it's this orange blob up here that we don't know what it is. And so I sat there because I knew what it was. And I took my phone out so I could take a picture of it. But he takes this out, and he unwraps the blankie, and he says, it's a baby. And he holds it up in the air like this, like Kunta Kinte, and he tells his TSA guy, it was a baby. And I don't know why I said this, but I said, yes. I said, well, at 22 weeks, that's what you look like in your mother's womb. And he smiled, and I said, and what's so sad is that we can also abort even further along than this. And he said, well, I have some feelings about that. And I said, yes, sir, many do, but thank God your mother did not. And I thought, well, you never know when you're going to have an impromptu fetal development lesson there. So abortion is definitely one of Satan's greatest deceptions. But we overcome this through compassion, sharing the gospel, and truth spoken in love. 2/3 of post-abortive women say that they would have not chose abortion if one person had supported them. And 70% were attending church at the time of their first abortion. So they're in our pews, men too, hurting, suffering in silence, waiting for grace. And if you have had an abortion, Alpha offers restoration and recovery classes. And guilt, hear me, guilt, blame, and shame do not get the last word in your story. God does. And he stands arms open wide, ready to restore you to true freedom. So the second Advent candle is peace. Not the peace of ease, but the peace of God with us. Even through suffering, loss, and chaos, I'm sure we can all agree that the world needs some Jesus, right? The Prince of Peace. And many women experiencing an unplanned, unexpected, or unsupported pregnancy need peace. And the third Advent candle is joy. Joy is complicated. Mary held joy in one hand and suffering in another, and many families do too. And yet God is still writing stories of redemption in our lives. The past 2 months, we were sent a few women over from Planned Parenthood for ultrasounds because Planned Parenthood does not do ultrasounds. They often send the women to us for verification of pregnancy. One woman was not planning to carry her child, but once she talked to an advocate and a nurse and had an ultrasound, she changed her mind. And another woman, she went back and forth. She went to Planned Parenthood a couple times, and she was actually pregnant with twins. And she was very unsure of, if she should have an abortion or not. And once she came and she saw again the babies, she chose life. And it's so exciting when you get to see these lives transformed. There are miracles of joy born right in the middle of fear. And at Alpha, we help families navigate difficult pregnancies. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happened to me. So when it comes to fetal anomalies or abnormalities or being incompatible with life, when I was pregnant the 5th time, the doctors told me that I had an oblighted ovum. I had a sac, an empty, misshapen gestational sac with no presence of life, indeed, or heartbeat. And they encouraged a D&C, but I refused, saying that as long as there was life in me, I was not going to abort. And they told me it wasn't an abortion. And I remember walking out of that door at Kaiser in Fairfield, and I just put my hand up in the air and I said, God, you raised Lazarus from the dead. Now breathe life into my baby. And afterwards I thought, I was kind of mean to God right there, but I would have talked to my dad like that too. So within a few weeks, I heard the most beautiful sound, and that was my baby's heartbeat. And I was so excited. But then the pregnancy goes on a little further, and they do another scan, and they said, your baby's femurs are too short, and her head is too large, and she has too much amniotic fluid. So they were suspecting dwarfism. They sent me to Alta Bates, and then because of the amount of fluid, they didn't know how mentally challenged she would be, and they didn't want to do an amnio because it could have sent me into labor. So I went home, and I shared this news with my other 4 children, and we decided that God would either perform a miracle or we would simply love a small child. And, I remember the night that my daughter Mary was born, and she did have hyaline membrane disease where the lungs aren't developed yet. She was born a little early, and due to the surfactant, the medication they give for the lungs to develop, she did really great. But the doctors told me she may not make it through the night. And I'm thinking, you have no idea all the different miracles that I've experienced so far with this child. And she received the medication, and she's perfectly healthy today. Yeah. Christmas is the story of a miracle child. My daughter Mary, her story is a modern echo of that truth, and that God is still a God of miracles, still rescuing, still restoring, and still writing better endings than we expected. My daughter Mary is a beautician, but after her experience with twin daughters in the NICU, she's now studying to be a nurse. So Mary and Joseph, I kid you not the holy little family, but the happy little family, they're really enjoying their family. They're really good parents, and they just love each other. And Mary always sends me a card and says, Mom, I'm so glad that, that I'm here. I want to thank you for my life. I'm like, no, you thank God for your life. And she said, but if you had listened to the doctors, I wouldn't be here to have this beautiful family. And, it's just miracles and misdiagnosis do happen. But even if I had a child with a condition like dwarfism, I would have never loved her any less. So yes, teen pregnancy and parenting were definitely difficult. But my baby and becoming a mother is my greatest joy and accomplishment. When the communities turned their backs on me, I had my baby, and it was Jesus that stood by my side. And if you've noticed, everyone who helped me in my story was a PRC volunteer, a pregnancy clinic, just like Alpha Clinics. And that's why I'm so passionate about urging more people to support the life-saving work of these centers. My parents were great role models. They helped me find daycare, keep my baby on a schedule, finish high school, and provide a loving, safe home. But not every young woman has parents like mine. But it is my dream that all young girls get all the support they need. Abortion affects generations, but so does choosing life. And it is proven that family brings us our greatest fulfillment in life. I look at my 5 children, my 5 bonus children, my 13 grandchildren, my great-grandchild, and I call them the abundant life on steroids. My family is definitely living proof that we do not need abortion to succeed. We need God's grace, we need our community, and we need courage. And Revive Family, your support helps families thrive. So the 4th candle is love. My life is full of love because God redeemed what once felt broken. And today I stand before you as a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, a business owner, a photographer, an author, a speaker, and volunteer advocate and board member of Alpha Clinics. And as a former client of a PRC, I am living proof of the transformational power of the life-saving work of the Lord and Alpha Clinics. And your support extends that same love into the world. You're helping mothers say yes to God, just like Mary did. And the 5th candle, the Christ candle that signifies Jesus' birth, is placed in the middle of the wreath on Christmas Eve. Pregnancy centers stand as light in the world's darkest places. Abortion, trafficking, exploitation, and despair. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The Advent wreath shines brighter each week, and so must we. As we prepare for Christmas, we remember a young mother, a humble father, and a baby whose life changed everything. Jesus came into the world in vulnerability, unseen, tiny, and forming in his mother's womb. Pregnancy Clinics reminds us that no matter how small or how humble or unexpected, the child holds world-changing potential. For unto us a child is born, and unto us a son is given, and every child is a gift from God. So I'm going to tell you another little story here. I'm an advocate for little girls who've been rescued out of trafficking. And it's very important for our ministries to link arms with other people. So there's a nonprofit that meets the young ladies who have been trafficked or sexually assaulted at the hospital. And this person knew that I am involved with Alpha Clinics, so she gave me a call one day. And she told me that there was a lady there, a young lady, 20 years old, and she had all the signs of trafficking. She had a barcode tattoo. She was very small, malnourished. She had some head injuries, and she had 2 telephones, and she accepted the help. And so they called me, and we got her over to Alpha Clinics, and she was able to see the baby in the womb, this little girl, saw her dancing around, and it really gave her hope. We got her into a safe home, and within a week, she called the trafficker. And so I was like mortified, and I'm like, let me get a hold of her. I said, I need you to get a message to her and tell her that she's pregnant now, and there is something called an anchor baby, which the trafficker will use as leverage. Sometimes he'll say, fine, you can leave, but the baby won't. Trafficked women have several coerced and forced abortions, but the trafficker will allow her to have 1 child. That child, after she ages out, is then able to be trafficked. And these are the type of things that we sometimes deal with. And I told her, I said, you are brave. I know you were strong enough. And she was able to get out of that situation again. And her baby girl are doing beautifully as well. So I want to thank you for partnering with this sacred mission. I will be back at the table to answer and take some donations. And then the Joy Drive, as you know, is a really cool thing. I appreciate that because you'll bring joy to a lot of the families by your offerings of diapers and formula and those kind of things. Any kind of gift cards are always appreciated. And I just want to say Merry Christmas to all of you. And may the God who came as a child bless you richly as you give life to others. Thank you so much.